Hear the trumpets, hear the pipers, 100 million angels singing. Multitudes are marching to the big kettle drum. Voices calling, voices crying. Some are born and some are dying. It's Alpha and Omega's kingdom come. And the whirlwind is in the thorn tree. The virgins are all trimming their wicks. The whirlwind is in the thorn tree. It's hard for thee to kick against the pricks. Till Armageddon, no shalom, no shalom. Then the father hen will call his chickens home. The wise men will bow down before the throne, and at his feet they'll cast their golden crowns when the man comes around. Whoever is unjust, let him be unjust still. Whoever is righteous, let him be righteous still. Whoever is filthy, let him be filthy still. Listen to the words long written down when the man comes around. Hear the trumpets, hear the pipers, 100 million angels singing. Multitudes are marching to the big kettle drum. Voices calling, voices crying. Some are born and some are dying. It's Alpha and Omega's kingdom come.
My Voices for Me started at a super young age. Originally, I had thought that they were imaginary friends or an imaginary friend, but my imaginary friend was not outside of my mind where I made some creature up and it was there playing with me. My imaginary friend was a character from a show I watched named Gargoyles, the red one, the Red Gargoyle, and I never remembered his name, so I always called him Red. And he was only in my head though. I knew he was not outside, he was in my head, and I would always imagine him in my head talking to me. And he would talk about things that was abnormal for a little 3-year-old girl to up above the age. Like what is good to do, what is bad to do at a young age. Weird stuff, I just can't remember specifically, but I knew it was weird for a little girl. That's all I recall. I never played with him, but he was always like a conscious, almost like Jiminy Cricket in the back of my head. So he was a good voice for a long period of my time, and when I started realizing he was an imaginary friend is when I was 9 and something traumatic happened to me, and I still had him in my head. When I was 9, I had a friend, and we stopped being friends in a very, very traumatic way, and I got really dark suddenly. For a 9-year-old, I got really dark. I wanted vengeance. I wanted to put them in pain, which is very weird for someone that age. My life was full of that type of stuff. That's why I need to go see a psychiatrist. But I was very vengeful all of a sudden, and I could hear him turn from the conscious of what you should do to get revenge. You need to get revenge. put them in pain, make them suffer. Now, I never did anything to her. It was just a dark moment in my life that I felt. I was sitting on the docks near my house, and it just, all this was filling my head and talking in my brain, and I wanted it, but I never did anything to them, and I hated them, hated her technically, for a very long time in my life, until I grew up and got out of it. Did they have names? The only one that had a name was the imaginary friend I had in the very beginning, which I named Red, and because that's how I recognized the gargoyle when I was like 3 years old, was he was red, and he was my favorite for some reason. I don't even know why. I haven't seen the show in ages. He kept that name till I was 9, and then when he switched from that normal like Jiminy Cricket kind of voice to something else, it tore the reality of that childhood imaginary friend to, this is not an imaginary friend, this is something else, and I didn't give it a title anymore. I don't have a title for them, I just call them the voices.
Hurry up, I'm starving. That's enough? That's your last mouthful, you fat bitch.
Don't be rude, Katie. You took your cereal. Katie, when I was younger, she helped me get through really tough times at home. And even at school, I would take myself off and just spend time with her. I was bullied at school. There was sexual abuse through my teens. My life was unbearable. 7 years ago, I found it easier to leave my home. I even had a job. I was a nursery assistant worker, and I loved looking after the children. It was when I was the happiest, when I was at work. When he appears in the kitchen,
you're selfish.
It's terrifying.
I'm going to burn the skin off your bones. You're going to hell.
I'm just trying to
I'm going to get you. You're going to hell.
stop the images in my head. So you're right on top of where the floor is opening up as well. So that's not good. So I just need to be out of this room. So
I'm going to kill you when you go outside.
We've been working together for about 3 years. And the goal is that I'm more independent. Someone's busy singing.
Who's that?
Katie.
Is she?
Yeah. My next step is to go outside more without Donna. To be able to go out to work is my long-term goal. To do that, you have to go outside. So I have to keep battling every day.
I began to hear voices when I was about 8 years old, and that was the age on which I was severely burned. I looked at them as they were my friends, because they were very friendly for me and told me stories and had conversations with me, protected me from quarrels, kept me company. I thought it was just normal to hear voices. The number of voices has always been the same. There were about 20 voices, and there were 2 or 3 important voices who spoke up all the time, and the rest of the voices behaved like a sort of back choir. Is that an English word? Yeah. And hummed. And when I was about 15 years old, it became a problem. They turned to be nasty and had comment on my behavior, which was not very nice anymore. They told me not to tell people about their existence, and also told me that I would be severely punished when I did. So I shut up. I never talked about them, because I thought their power was stronger than mine.
Now when Jesus was risen early the first day of the week, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene, out of whom he had cast 7 devils.
Well, when I was really young, it was sort of, the voices became like my friends. It's really hard, like sometimes there's like really random, they tell jokes.
Can you hear them now?
Yeah.
Sammy first began hearing voices and seeing things when she was about 7. They seemed friendly to start with, but in her teens, some of the voices became more aggressive. Then things got worse in her early 20s.
I had this overwhelming feeling and these voices like telling me to hurt myself and my family, like to basically kill my whole family. That's what the voices are telling me to do. So, but I was still kind of in this place where I knew that this could not be real, like it might not be real, but it feels so real to me that I could do it, like that they feel like they're around me and I could potentially hurt everybody in this house. 24 hours later, I was informally admitted to psychiatric ward. One of the practitioners there had told me that everything I was experiencing wasn't real and it's all a part of my imagination, and I just was like, what?
It can be tempting to say, oh, the voices, no, it's not real, don't worry about it. But for the individual, it really does feel real.
That was the first time I'd ever opened up about specific voices or the friends I'd made in my mind along my way, and it was just a shock to my system.
Antipsychotic drugs can be prescribed to try and reduce and control some of the symptoms of psychosis, but they can't cure them. Currently, Sammy isn't taking any medication.
On one hand, it can be really great for you, but sometimes the side effects can be a bit too much for some people to bear, and it kind of, it's weird, it's there to make your life better, but then also in other ways can hinder the quality of your life, I guess.
So if Daddy ever comes...
No, Daddy's going to take a break right now, so I'm staff, okay?
What do you know of schizophrenia?
It makes you have imaginary friends.
It makes you have imaginary friends. Are you schizophrenic? Do you know?
I think I am schizophrenic.
As a baby, she never slept, and that's, as I always say, it's not hyperbole. She literally would not sleep. She would do 20, 30-minute power naps 24 hours a day. So as a newborn, she was getting 2-3 hours of sleep a day. Otherwise, she'd just scream. Until we one day figured out that when we stepped outside, she stopped screaming. We went back in, she started screaming again. By 3 months, we were taking her out all day, every day. And we did this for 2 years straight. One place wasn't enough. It's like her mind was a sponge. We'd go somewhere, she'd absorb it, she'd grow bored with it, and then we'd have to move on to the next place. So we might go to the zoo, a play area, and Barnes & Noble play area all in the same day. At 2, she started to talk about what we thought were imaginary friends.
Why?
The first one to appear was 400 the cat, and she would just play with 400. We didn't think too much of it. Oh, I know what she needs. You need a Thorazine, Jenny. The medication, the Thorazine, for every delusion that the Thorazine kills, another one comes to take its place. And Jenny's unwilling to let go of the good ones because they're her friends. She had always been very, very social because, of course, we were out all the time. But then, right around her 3rd birthday, she started to become antisocial. She would scream at people if they called her January. She would tell her friends that she didn't want to play with them anymore. At one point, she had probably as many as 20 or 30 friends, and they just, slowly all dropped away. And the number of imaginary friends kept growing and growing and growing. And then, at 5, the violence began. She began hitting, kicking, biting, throwing shoes. When I would say that she would hit, these weren't like tantrums. The impact of her blows was like she was fighting for her life. And there was no warning. One moment she's like, I love you, Daddy. And then all of a sudden, she is literally trying to scratch my eyes out. She would be like that for 10 or 15 minutes, and then she'd come dead after it. Slowly became obvious, but not till she went into UCLA, that she was disassociating from those violent moments.
This is Miss 60.
And really didn't remember them. She knew that she'd done something wrong, but she didn't know what.
She was 5 years old and he was born, and she was running around the hospital going nuts before any medication. I grabbed her. I just grabbed her and put her on my lap. And she turned to somebody who was not there and said, "Ooh, she's not pregnant anymore," in that kind of a voice. And it kind of freaked me out. I'd never heard her talk like that. I'd never heard her talk specifically to like somebody else. We knew she had all the imaginary friends, but it didn't quite, it started to sort of add up, basically. But we did take her to a psychologist because it got to the point where we couldn't live with her.
All right, sweetie, how are you doing? How are you doing? You ready to go swimming?
Now and Bodhi. Do you think you see your friends more now or less since you went to the hospital?
More.
More?
Yeah, more. Because Thorzine's not helping very much.
Do you want them to go away?
400 I do, and Wednesday I do. Because they're bad.
How are they bad?
They tell me to do bad things.
What kind of bad things?
Like hitting and screaming, and kicking.
What does it feel like when Wednesday tells you to hit or kick?
Wednesday bites me until I do it.
Okay, what does 400 do?
She scratches.
She scratches.
Because she doesn't know how to hit.
So originally, we had a 2-bedroom apartment in this complex. Keeping Jenny from hurting Bodhi was a 24-hour-a-day job. So we traded in our 2-bedroom for 2 1-bedroom apartments. Jenny's apartment is in this building, and then right across the parking lot, about 100 feet away on the 3rd floor, is Bodhi's apartment. I mean, financially it's been harder because the 2 put together are still $500 more than what I was paying for the 2-bedroom. You know, I wish she could have had more of a childhood than she has had, but her illness took that from her. You have to think about it like you have this sweet, blonde, normal-looking 6-year-old girl, but there are all these characters that are out to get her. And as long as she is occupied, they stay at bay. This is never going to be over. I mean, this is a lifetime illness for her.
Therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knoweth that he hath but a short time.
There's obviously different types of voices and different kinds of experiences. For me, the voices are outside my head, so they are something that I perceive with my ears, therefore they are defined as a hallucination. And they are as real as, well, they sound as real sounds, so the way that I'm talking now, the way my voice is talking now would be the same way I would hear the voices. Also, they come from different areas, so for me, there are certain ones that I find are very close to my ears, and mostly at night time, actually, they're very close to my ears, or they feel like they're sort of in my head. Even though I can hear them, I can hear the sound coming out of my head, if that makes sense, or at the back of my head, or here, just kind of basically all around my head is where they are. But also, I've had ones that sound like they're outside, sound like they're upstairs in the hallway, sound like they're in the corners of the room, stuff like that. Auditory hallucinations aren't just voices, really. They can be sounds as well. So the ones that I can't really tell the difference whether they're real or not is things like I'd hear people walking around outside my room and turning on light switches and turning off light switches, opening and closing doors, stuff like that. So I would think there's people in the house, but when I'd leave my room to check, there'd be nobody there. So that's kind of impossible to tell, because there could very well be somebody there, you know. So they're the main ones that I've had that are similar to normal sounds. At nighttime as well, like, it's not just voices. Like, this thing happened to me for 2 nights in a row. I think last week I was hearing crying, like babies crying, like kind of quite distressed crying, which distressed me. So it can be negative, like, I'm not gonna lie.
Now I was in bed, right here, this is where I lay, and I had my pillow over my head, and I wasn't asleep yet. This isn't a situation where you're half asleep, half awake. I was still awake, I just lay down in bed. We turn off the TV, and it was like 10 minutes later, I'm still moving around trying to get comfortable for all of these situations, because when you begin to fall asleep, that's what I usually do. And suddenly in this ear, because I always lay like on this side, and this ear, through my pillow, like not even through my pillow, it was like next to me. So in between the pillow and my ear, I heard a little girl laugh. Like, I was like, what? I got spooked by it. I'm like, oh my god, that's so scary. Because I don't have any children in the house. We didn't have the TV on. We just turned the TV off 10 minutes prior. I heard a little girl laugh. I was like, oh. And I got chills through me, and I just kind of ignored it the best I could and went to sleep. Now, 2 weeks later, the same thing happened. I was laying on my side of my bed, pillow on my head, and I heard a little boy say hello. And I was like, oh. This one didn't give me chills for some reason. I was just like, oh, what? And it didn't really spook me, because I heard the little girl laugh like 2 weeks prior. I was set up, like, okay, I'm going through something, so I got to prepare myself for this. And again, I just ignored it and went back to sleep. But the creepiest one happened maybe 3 weeks ago. This one spooked me. This was when I was asleep. I was asleep, laying in bed, same position, with pillow on head. What happened was I was sleeping, and in my sleep I heard a baby cry. And I woke up, thinking that maybe it was just my dream, and it just woke me up. No, after I woke up, being wide awake, because it's still nighttime, because I wake up like instantly at night for some reason, and the noise, the baby cry, kept going, just kept wang, wang, wang. And I was like, we don't have children in this house. And so it really spooked me. I was like, what the hell? And I just laid there. It's like I didn't want to move. Like, something was telling me to get up and go look for it. But I was like, no, that's a dumb idea, because I know for a fact there's no children in this house. So like, it just has to be me. It just has to be my schizoaffective disorder. It just has to be. So I just continued sleeping after that. I don't know how I'm able to fall asleep after these things. I think it's just this like, just shut up and go to sleep kind of situation.
The other ones, then, I feel like it's like I'm overhearing a conversation, like especially at nighttime. It's like I'm overhearing a conversation. A group of people are in a room having a conversation, and I'm overhearing it. That's what it feels like. You can have voices as well inside your head. This isn't something I've experienced much, but I have experienced it. And basically what that's like is, imagine you're just going about your day, and all of a sudden it's almost like a sentence will pop into your head, but you didn't create the sentence, you don't know where it came from, and it's something that feels like it's just interrupted your thoughts all of a sudden. That's the best way I can describe it. So it's not like your inner monologue, it's not like your thoughts, it very much feels like something that's completely come from outside you and just suddenly landed in your brain. Like, that's what it feels like. So for me, I could be walking around doing something, and I might hear something that's like blue light bulb, like, you know what I mean, inside my head. So I would be doing whatever, and then blue light bulb would just come into my thoughts all of a sudden. So obviously that's not like something I could kind of just come up with there and then, but also the fact that it disrupts my own thoughts makes sense to me, that it's a hallucination or a distortion or some kind of thing like that.
I do hear things. I don't hear voices. I do hear cats. That wasn't actually a joke. That's a weird one, isn't it? I don't even like cats that much. I hear creaking, like floorboards. I occasionally hear music, which I don't mind. Creaking can be difficult.
But I don't name my voices or nothing like that. I don't really picture them. Like, I guess I do, in a sense. Like, the jump one, I don't even know. He's a man, anyway. But I don't see him as a human man. Like, I just kind of see him as a face, basically. I see him as a face. Black hair, like, I don't know. Now when I think about it, yeah, I do kind of see an image. And the woman, the bomb on the tube one, or the bomb in your brain, like, she'd say different things. Like, there's a bomb in your brain and stuff. I always imagined her as blonde with a fringe and like blonde down here, British, because that was her accent, so she was British, and she was wearing like the TfL Transport for London uniform. Because I heard it on the tube from the speaker, it would have made sense to me that she worked for them or something and she was saying this. But so yeah, but they're the only two. I haven't like given faces or images to any of the other ones, and I haven't given them names or anything like that. I can't have conversations with them, I don't think. I think I've probably tried many times, but they haven't answered me, or if they answer me, it doesn't really answer what I've just asked. So I would say, why are you here? And then they might say, go eat an ice cream, like, you know? So it's not like a two-way thing. I feel like it's just, I have to listen. That's how it works. They don't listen to me or anything. But my theories, okay, so obviously, you know, the psychiatric view on this is that it comes from your own mind. It is something internal that manifests externally. For me, I don't really believe that, to be honest.
And the first thing I think I'll talk about is voices. And I've said before on some of these that it is something I don't get often. But when I'm going through a bad stretch, I certainly do have problems with it. A lot of people I've spoken to previously have very specific voices. For example, they have one person who speaks to them, whether it be someone completely made up or someone they already know. I was speaking to someone who has a woman who's always there, a pretty scary white woman, almost ghost-like, he described her as. But I don't have a person as such. I hear voices on the wind, if that makes sense. I've had a little bit of an affinity with the wind since I was little, actually. I read a book when I was very young. It was a children's book by George MacDonald, I think his name is. And it's called At the Back of the North Wind. And the wind is a, personified, a character. And I guess that's something I've picked up and carried through into this adulthood and illness. Whispers on the wind. And they can be not negative always, confusing, contradicting what I am feeling at the time. Like a therapist. Yeah. Just kind of pushing me in one direction, telling me to go one way when I should be going the other. That I should be following a certain path that I'm not. both metaphorically and not, I suppose. I don't think of her, she is a he, she is a she, sorry. I don't think of her as something negative, something bad at all. She doesn't outright say do these things. It's just a kind of push in a direction which I was not intending. That's a common one. I think that's the one I suppose I get the most. And I think the other ones that I get are based around that somehow still. It would be noises in trees, in the snow, whispers from the weather, normally. So those would be my voices. They don't tell me that to go out and kill people, if that's what you're wondering. And they don't tell me that I am worthless or that I should do things that I don't want to do. But they do question my motives and my thoughts, I suppose. So that would be on the voices.
And I went into the shop, and in them days they used to have the TVs all lined up on one side. They had the same newsreader, you know, it's the same channel on, you know, so you see the same channel. And I got in the shop, and it's sort of like, all of a sudden I just felt this sort of burning sensations in my ears, like a heat in my ears. And it's sort of like I can't explain it, but like a closing in, like a circle closing in. And the newsreader just turned around and said, "The news is just for you. This 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 news is just for you."
Marius Rom has continued to discover people leading normal lives who hear voices from the outside. One of these is Lucy Berkman, who recently heard the voice of her dead mother. Rom invited her to breakfast.
You had some years of a conflict within your mind, let's say, is this marriage
yes,
worthwhile?
I think 10 years on? At least. Yeah.
10 years
yeah.
at least. So at the moment you did not have made a decision, and in that period,
yeah, it was,
your mother experienced.
In the middle of the day, I think 11 or 12 o'clock, and I wasn't thinking of getting a divorce at all at that moment. Well, in that period, yeah. But not at that moment. I think I was cooking or something like that, and at once I heard her voice. Yeah.
You got a little bit, oh, who's that, or not?
Yeah, well, I had a feeling that someone was behind us, somebody was behind me.
Would she have been positive about the divorce?
Oh, not at all. When she was alive, she would have think it was terrible to do so.
She would have never agreed.
Never agreed, oh no.
So it was in fact a little bit a different mother this time.
It was a different mother, yes. Kindly, friendly, supporting, yeah. I was so afraid that when I talked to someone about it, they would tell me, well, you were growing mad, you have to look for help and so, yeah.
Mostly people aren't going to be enthusiastic.
Yeah,
hey,
well,
that's
no, I didn't.
You
didn't talk about it.
And now you have been divorced and you still hear these voices of your mother or not?
I like to hear it.
Oh, you like
so
to hear it? So
I
invite her from time.
Yeah, that's the right word. I invite her time to time. Well, am I doing well? What do you think about this? What do you think about that? And, it's part of my life.
The last traumatic event I had really was losing my partner. She died. And I think that, although it didn't show itself as voices for a long time afterwards, was actually the beginning of a long period of coming to terms with that event. The voices being the, if you like, the whole event being brought back to me in a very real way, because one of the voices I heard was the voice of the partner. She got herself into quite a state, and she actually killed herself, which was was probably the worst thing. The second worst thing being that I was the one that walked in on her. I think that hitting you and having to actually find the person you love dead, then you get caught up in all this sense of guilt and anger and all sorts. So I ended up sort of cutting off all relationship with parents and family and everything for quite a long time.
Put on the whole armor of God, that ye may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil.
I even thought they were a sort of mighty gods who ruled the world and sometimes picked some people to tease and to control.
I heard little voices like angels.
You may think that if someone hears voices, they hear more than one. But for Chris, this isn't the case. He's had one consistent voice that composes both positive and negative, depending on the day.
The first time I was hearing the voice was 10 years ago, and it coincided with a time when Jehovah's Witnesses came around to my house, and I kind of invited them in, and we did like a Bible study, and a lot of it seemed to make sense to me, and I kind of really got into just believing what they said. And then the nature of the voice that I hear has like a spiritual element to it. I believe it's like a higher power speaking to me. The way you see your voice is something quite interesting, because the way I see the voice is I truly believe that it is someone speaking to me. Even that I'm at stability now, I still believe there is a person speaking to me, and I'm not sure how frequent that is. I guess that's from the people I've spoken to. Actually, I've heard that that's quite common, that they actually believe their experiences are real. At times, the dynamic with the voice has been quite good, but other times it wants me sometimes to do quite sort of arduous sort of tasks. Sometimes like going without things, maybe perhaps going without eating, or foregoing some cigarettes at times, and it wants me to like do stuff like standing out in the cold, and there has been times when it can be quite tough, and I guess ways to overcome it. One way was setting deadlines, sort of thing. It was like I was setting these deadlines, saying I'm going to do it for 2 or 3 more days, what the voice says, and then that's it. You know, at that deadline, that's going to be it. I'm not going to do any more. Because the one thing with the voice I hear, it was like it wanted me to do all these things, but never really told me why it wanted me to do them. So one of the deadlines I set was saying, okay, in a week's time, if it hasn't come to light why I'm supposed to be doing these things, then I'm not going to do any more.
And I would also hear voices just of pretty much the same, not all of the same things, but the same kind of themes. Like I would think that Jesus was talking to me. This smudge on the lens. Okay, I would think that Jesus was talking to me. So I would hear who I thought was Jesus, saying like thank you and stuff like that. How it worked was I would hear the voice first, and then then my brain would try and rationalize like where that voice came from. And so the most rational explanation of hearing voices is something spiritual or religious. So of course I heard a voice, and I'm like, well, the only spiritual, or one of the spiritual entities that I've been immersed, that's one of the spiritual entities that I've been immersed in from my culture, is Jesus. So I heard like thank you or I love you, I don't even remember, and I thought it was Jesus. So people who are schizophrenic, or people who with psychosis with their bipolar, schizoaffective or whatever, from what I've heard, they have similar things, and what I've read in textbooks is you'll either have like benign spirits talking to you, or benign voices, where the voices say I love you and stuff like that, or they'll say I hate you and say like mean things. And when I first started having psychosis, when I would hear what I thought were spirits, they were very positive. So it would be things like, I love you, and kind of like telling me to be careful. Like I would hear a voice that was like, be careful, and I don't know, I would just hear voices, and that would make me super paranoid and kind of crazy, and like just wondering like what the fuck was wrong. Then when I had a really bad psychotic episode, that is when I had the negative voices. So all the early stuff, it was mostly positive, just kind of like hearing people's voices. Like people I knew, I would hear their voices.
John Nash had 2 sons before he developed schizophrenia. Nash has passed on both his genius and his schizophrenia to his youngest son, Johnny. Dr. Nancy Andreasen has come to meet with Nash, his wife Alicia, and their son as she pursues her research in the links between creativity and mental illness.
When you first started having symptoms, as we would say,
I was in my teens.
You were in your teens.
I was a born-again Christian. I was a fanatic. I was a religious fanatic. And the voices I heard, I interpreted them all as God, you know. Every voice was God. And so everything they told me to do was a command from God, and I was a good Christian, so I had to do what they said.
What kinds of things did the voices say?
I walked out into the middle of the highway, you know, and they wanted me to stand there in the middle of the highway. You know, that sort of thing, you know, pretty severe.
Pretty severe.
Yes. I didn't realize that my father had passed on anything to me. I was just caught by surprise. Yeah. I was not savvy like you psychiatrists know that sort of thing runs in the family. Instead, you know, I was completely caught by surprise. I was flipped out at the time. You know, I had given up my chess and my math. But I didn't really suspect that I was headed for a mental hospital.
So you were in your teens, but you also managed to recover enough so that you were able to go back and eventually get a PhD in math.
Well, that's the remarkable thing, yeah, that during my religious insanity, I lost all ability to do mathematics. I had been a mathematical genius, you know, 800 on the essay, on the achievement test. But I lost all ability to do mathematics. I couldn't add a column of numbers. But then I went back to school. The voices disappeared, and I took up math again. And I regained all my mathematical abilities I had lost. And I went on to get a PhD, yes. I published and I taught, yeah. I followed in my father's footsteps, to do honor to my father, you know.
Yeah, yeah. And
Johnny Nash, like his father, often experienced periods where he was able to regain his full intellectual capacity. But the psychosis would always reoccur, making life a roller coaster between insanity and lucidity.
But I'm still suffering, you know, the symptoms of mental illness. You know, I hallucinate, I still hallucinate, you know, but I can function. I function despite the mental illness, functioning schizophrenia.
I had some delusions last week, so I want to try and explain those. So the first delusion I had, and I kind of still think about this, is that I was being persecuted by God. Because a lot of people have delusions of persecution where they believe people are out to get them and stuff like that, but I believed that God was out to get me. And I had this image of a tunnel because we did this exercise in the hospital. It was like a group exercise about, you know, there always being light at the end of the tunnel and stuff like that. And God was basically telling me that there was no light at the end of my tunnel. So I thought I was trapped in this eternal tunnel that was never going to end. And I thought God is all powerful and he's the only one who can get me out of the tunnel, and I'm not as powerful as God, therefore I'm not going to be able to get out of the tunnel. But then God started talking to me, and he told me that if God made all of us, there's a piece of God inside us. And if I allowed that piece of God to grow, I could become more powerful than God, and I could get out of the tunnel. So God was telling me all this stuff. And then he was telling me that I needed to write a Bible, like my own Bible. So I bought 2 notebooks, but funnily enough, I didn't write anything in them. Before I bought the notebooks, I was writing a lot of stuff down on paper. But I felt like it wasn't really me writing. I felt like I was channeling God, basically. So that lasted a couple of days, and then my medication was increased. And funnily enough, my medication was increased is when God stopped talking to me. So I kind of figured out that it had to have been me hearing voices, basically. It wasn't God's voice, but I still kind of believe it was. Apart from that, like, as I said, I'm on weekend leave, but I have to go back to the hospital tomorrow. I'm a bit impatient, to be honest. Like, I just want to leave the hospital. I really, really want to leave the hospital now. It's been 3 weeks. It's been long enough. But basically, the people around me aren't convinced that I'm well enough.
Offer unto God thanksgiving, and pay thy vows unto the Most High. And call upon me in the day of trouble. I will deliver thee, and thou shalt glorify me.